I've explained before how I think routers are one of the more underappreciated devices in any given organization. Many of them sit at the perimeter of the network without the protections of multiple firewalls and access policies that internal devices get, which makes these external routers a great target for hackers. But despite this, very few people update their routers, and even fewer people do regular audits of their router's security for low-hanging fruit, like making sure that they can't be accessed with default login credentials. Hopefully that changes in the coming months because thousands of routers manufactured by Forfaith have been discovered to be vulnerable to a command injection bug that allows hackers to take over the device and, by extension, take over the network. Now, the only reason that this command injection vulnerability doesn't have a critical rating by NIST is because the attacker needs to be authenticated in order to pull this attack off. But like I said, a lot of people fail to change and/or disable the default login credentials on their router. And that's an important distinction to make because even if your organization has an admin account that they configured for the network engineers or other internal employees to service the device, there could still be a dormant admin account that comes pre-configured by default that hackers are just one Google search away from finding and logging into. So far, there's been two Forfaith router models that are confirmed as affected, the F3X24 and the F3X36. There's more than 15,000 of these internet-facing router models in use around the world, primarily in Turkey and China. But there are still a handful of vulnerable Forfaith routers in the United States, Italy, France, Denmark, and other nations. I also have to point out that these 15,000 vulnerable routers are just the internet-facing ones that are much easier to discover and audit. But it's unknown how many more of these could be internal routers that could still be compromised by someone going on site, doing the command injection attack, and then giving themselves persistent access to that router and everything else that's connected to it through a small single board computer, like what was depicted in the Steel Mountain episode of Mr. Robot. So let's take a look at the post request that's compromising these routers. As we can see here in the headers, this is a standard HTTP post request that's being sent to the apply CGI endpoint. This is the router's IP address, and this request is being sent over port 90. Now, the user agent here is likely being spoofed to make this request appear more legitimate. It's the same exact user agent that was discovered in a similar hacking campaign about a month ago. And in reality, this request is probably being made from some kind of automated process. There's probably a script that's running on someone's machine or probably multiple machines, checking for these vulnerable routers and then trying to do this attack on them. Now, this string here with the authorization basic, this is the default admin credentials base 64 encoded. So again, this is why it's very, very important to change the credentials on your router, because just like that, an unauthenticated request can be made as an authenticated request, and it leads to some bad things happening on your router. Now, the payload of this request contains multiple ADJ time or adjust time parameters. And of course, that's meant for adjusting the time and date of the router. Now, at first, everything looks pretty normal. The seconds, for example, ADJ time sec is set to 32. And then we can see the ADJ time day is set to the 27th, and the ADJ time month is set to 10 or October. The hour is being set to 11. So everything looks pretty normal until we get here to this ADJ time year parameter, and it's getting set to a year that I don't think is on anybody's calendar out there. And the reason why is because this is actually the command injection that is being sent. So the router is going to execute this entire command here just like any other one. And actually, if we go to the end, we can see that they then have some more legit adjust time commands sent in here, like adjust time min to 35. So I'm going to go ahead and decode this command and break down for you guys exactly what it's doing. This is the command written out plainly without any URL encoding, and right off, we can see that this whole thing is being executed in a subshell. So the entire command is being interpreted by the router as it processes that ADJ time year parameter. So first, the working directory is changed to TMP, which is a temporary directory on Unix-based systems. The mknodboy-p command creates a named pipe that is called boy, lowercase b, capital OY, in that TMP directory. On Unix-based systems, pipes allow for inter-process communications, but unlike regular pipes, which are also used in this command injection, the named pipe can persist if necessary for as long as the system is up, even after its main process ends. These pipes also don't get written to the file system, which can make them harder to find than if the attackers were to use a file for inter-process communication. But you could still see indications of compromise by looking at processes that are running on the router in real time. So if you see processes like this mknodboy, or especially if you see the netcat command, which we're going to get to in a little bit, then that could be a good indication that something seriously bad has happened to your router. So after we set up the named pipe, we have the cat command, which reads input from the boy pipe, and it sends this to an interactive shell, which has its standard error redirected to standard output, so that both of those get sent to the attacker instead of to an error log file or something else like that on the router. The output of this shell is then piped to the netcat command, which connects to the attacker's machine at this IP address over port 1270. Then we've got this part which redirects the input from the attacker's netcat listener back into the boy pipe, creating a two-way communication channel, better known as a reverse shell. And then, of course, when the attack is completed, the boy pipe gets removed, erasing the evidence of what happened. Usually, these reverse shells are just temporarily used to deploy some kind of more advanced malware that communicates back to a command and control server for further exploitation. Now, let's talk about mitigating this kind of attack. Obviously, the best course of action would be to just update the affected routers with a patch that fixes this command injection attack on the ADJ time year parameter. But unfortunately, at the time I'm recording this, Faith has not fixed this problem despite being informed about it on December the 20th. So the best course of action now is to simply change the admin credentials for your freaking router and disable any default admin accounts that nobody else is using. Another good solution is to limit what IP addresses can access the apply CGI endpoint in the first place. Unless this is a public router in a cafe or something like that, honestly, access to the entire router should be restricted. But even if the router's sole purpose is just to allow people in a coffee shop to watch YouTube and browse Reddit on their phones, they still don't need to access the apply CGI endpoint or any other configuration endpoint in order to do that. So go secure your devices, follow the principle of least privileges, and always practice good OPSEC. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it to hack the algorithm, and check out my online store, based.win, where you can buy my awesome merch and accessories for your phone or laptop. 10% discount store-wide for paying in Monero XMR at checkout. Have a great rest of your day.